William Bridges' book, Transitions, Making Sense of Life's Changes, is not written like a typical self-help or business book. It does not begin with formulas, rules, or techniques. Instead, it begins with a quiet observation about human life. Bridges notices that people experience change constantly, yet they often feel confused, stuck, or emotionally overwhelmed when change happens. They may change jobs, relationships, roles, or identities, but even when the change seems positive, something inside them struggles to adjust. Bridges' central insight is that this struggle is not a personal failure. It is not weakness, laziness, or resistance for its own sake. It is the natural psychological process of transition, a process that most people experience but very few understand or name. The book explains its ideas by first helping the reader see that change and transition are not the same thing. Change is what happens in the outside world. It is the event, the situation, the shift that can be pointed to on a calendar. You get a new job. You move to a new city. A relationship ends. A company restructures. Transition, however, is what happens inside a person as they come to terms with that change. It is emotional. It is psychological. It involves identity, meaning, and self-understanding. Bridges explains that people often believe the problem is the change itself, when in reality the problem is that they have not been supported or guided through the inner transition that must follow. Rather than arguing this idea in abstract terms, Bridges explains it through stories that feel familiar. He describes people who appear to have everything going for them, yet feel empty or unsettled after a promotion. He describes organizations that introduce new systems and structures, yet find that morale drops and productivity suffers. He describes individuals who move on quickly in practical terms, but remain emotionally tied to what they left behind. These stories are not dramatic or exaggerated. They are ordinary. That ordinariness is important because it allows readers to recognize themselves. Bridges does not say, "Here is a theory you must accept." He says, in effect, look at your own life. Notice what actually happens. As the book unfolds, Bridges introduces a simple model to explain how transitions work. He does not present it as a rigid framework or a checklist. He presents it as a map of emotional territory that people naturally pass through. According to Bridges, every transition has 3 phases: an ending, a neutral zone, and a new beginning. What surprises most people is that transition does not start with a beginning, it starts with an ending. This is one of the most important ideas in the book, and Bridges takes time to explain it gently and clearly. When something changes, even if the change is welcome, something else must end. A role, an identity, a routine, or an assumption is lost. Bridges explains that people cannot simply move forward without acknowledging this loss. If they try, the loss does not disappear. It goes underground. It shows up as resistance, sadness, anger, confusion, or disengagement. By framing resistance as a response to loss, Bridges changes how the reader understands human behavior. Resistance is not stubbornness. It is grief that has not been recognized. Bridges explains endings by talking about how much of our sense of self is tied to what we do and how we live. When those things change, the loss can feel personal, even if we cannot fully explain why. A person leaving a job is not just losing a paycheck. They are losing a familiar identity, a social role, a sense of competence, and often a source of meaning. Bridges emphasizes that endings must be acknowledged before people can truly move on. This acknowledgement can take many forms. Sometimes it is a conversation. Sometimes it is a ritual. Sometimes it is simply allowing oneself to feel sadness instead of rushing past it. The key point is that endings are real, and pretending otherwise makes transition harder, not easier. After explaining endings, Bridges turns to what he calls the neutral zone. This is the most misunderstood part of transition and also the most important. The neutral zone is the time when the old way no longer fits, but the new way has not yet fully formed. People often describe this period as confusing, uncomfortable, or disorienting. Bridges explains that modern culture tends to treat this discomfort as a problem to be solved as quickly as possible. We want clarity, certainty, and direction right away, but the neutral zone cannot be rushed without cost. In explaining the neutral zone, Bridges uses language that normalizes uncertainty. He describes it as a psychological no-man's land, a space between identities. People in the neutral zone may feel less confident than usual. They may question themselves. Their productivity may dip. Bridges explains that this does not mean something is wrong. It means a deeper internal reorganization is taking place. Old assumptions are loosening, but new ones have not yet settled. This can feel frightening, but it is also where creativity and renewal become possible. One of the ways Bridges explains the value of the neutral zone is by pointing out that many breakthroughs happen only after old structures fall apart. He notes that people often look back on confusing or difficult periods and realize that those were the times when they redefined who they were. The neutral zone allows people to experiment, reflect, and imagine new possibilities. Bridges emphasizes that if leaders or individuals try to eliminate the neutral zone entirely, they may end up with superficial change rather than real transformation. Throughout the book, Bridges explains that emotions are not distractions from transition, they are the transition. People cannot think their way through change alone, they must feel their way through it. This is why logical arguments, incentives, and plans often fail to motivate people during periods of change. Bridges explains that until people feel that their losses have been recognized and that their uncertainty is understood, they will not fully engage with the future. Bridges also spends time explaining how transitions affect identity. He points out that much of what people resist is not the new situation itself, but the threat it poses to who they believe they are. When a role changes, a person may silently ask, "Who am I now?" The book explains that transitions require a reworking of identity, not just behavior. This is true in personal life and in organizations. When companies change direction, employees are not just learning new tasks, they are renegotiating their place, value, and meaning within the system. When Bridges discusses beginnings, he is careful to explain that beginnings do not automatically follow change. A beginning is not the same as a start date. A beginning happens when people internalize the new reality and begin to see themselves differently within it. Bridges explains that successful beginnings require clarity, purpose, and reinforcement. People need to understand not just what is changing, but why it matters. They need to see how the new situation connects to values and meaning. Without this, beginnings remain fragile and easily abandoned. Bridges explains his ideas about beginnings by emphasizing that people do not commit to what they do not understand. He shows how leaders often announce new initiatives without giving people a compelling reason to care. In contrast, a true beginning energizes people because it gives them a sense of direction and identity. Bridges explains that beginnings are strengthened by symbols, language, and actions that reinforce the new reality. These signals help people let go of the past and step fully into the future. Another way Bridges explains his ideas is by connecting modern transitions to older human practices. He points out that many traditional societies had clear rituals for marking life transitions. These rituals acknowledged endings, supported people through a period of uncertainty, and welcomed them into a new role. Modern life has largely lost these shared structures, leaving individuals to navigate transitions alone. By naming and explaining the stages of transition, Bridges offers a kind of psychological ritual that helps people make sense of what they are experiencing. Throughout the book, Bridges moves back and forth between personal stories and organizational examples. This reinforces the idea that the same emotional dynamics apply in many contexts. Whether someone is changing careers, retiring, becoming a parent, or adapting to a new corporate strategy, the inner process follows similar patterns. This universality is part of what makes the book powerful. Readers do not feel that the ideas apply only to a narrow situation. They see that transitions are a fundamental part of being human. The tone of the book is calm, respectful, and humane. Bridges does not blame people for struggling with change. He does not urge them to push harder or think more positively. Instead, he invites readers to pay attention to their inner experience. He explains that confusion, grief, and uncertainty are not signs of failure. They are signs that a real transition is underway. By framing transition as a response to loss, Bridges changes how the reader understands human behavior. Resistance is not stubbornness, it is grief that has not been recognized.